Hello, welcome to our latest podcast, where three humans share their take on AI. In today's episode, Mike, Campbell, and I discuss why the differences between human and AI intelligence matter. Welcome to our podcast on a great new topic. It's one of my favorites. It's human versus AI. This started, I did a Substack article talking about human versus AI and the use of technology around healthcare and doing medical charting. And that seemed to get Mike excited and Campbell to really talk about their huge differences between human and AI intelligence and why that is important as people are looking at utilizing AI or developing their own AI strategy. I'm going to kick it off because what I think we miss a lot in the discussion of AI, we talk about wanting AI to be AGI and like humans. Humans are fallible. We make mistakes all the time. We also happen to behave really well on partial data. If you're driving down the street and you don't know what the next car is going to do or not, it's amazing. We don't get into more accidents and things that we do every day. Whereas AI is dependent on the data that we feed it, whether it's to do training or how it's going to develop. And then the other comment, real quick, is we learn differently. We were talking right before this call about the difference between writing down notes or typing them, where you have that note taker recording them. And humans learn differently. And each time you learn something new, you create new neural pathways to that information. So you're constantly evolving your mind, whereas most of the AI that we talk about is dependent on the core data that it was trained on. You may be able to fine tune it or do other things to improve the data and make it more current. But the basics of the data and the math and the way that AI works is pretty well built in based on the training and the model. And if we look at that as two different forms of intelligence, I think it's a much brighter opportunity. So I do think it matters hugely. Mike and Campbell have heard me talk about it more than they want to hear, I'm sure, that we need to stop talking about AI in human terms and give it its own lexicon of terms so that number one, we don't undervalue AI, and truthfully, we don't undervalue humans as well. Mike, do you want to add your 3 cents?
Sure. 3 cent inflation, 3 cents. Okay, got it.
There you go.
No, there are so many examples now of where AI does the work, but it doesn't replace human thinking. And I agree with your point because I am somebody who is both a visual and tactile learner. So for me, I've used the note takers, and they're great. They have an absolute purpose. It's much better to go back to find the fine detail and the follow up actions, no doubt about it. The difference, though, when you're writing something down, and that is that it carves that neural pathway. When you drive a route and you do it over and over and over again, it carves a neural pathway. You know what to expect. Oh, this is a dangerous intersection. This is a stop sign that people run. Oh, this is where the cops tend to sit, which is important to. But if you just become reliant on AI, you will find yourself veering into the unknown and perhaps not learning. So I think that there is still quite a ways to go before we can completely just acquiesce to AI the way some people believe that we're going to. Again, and I'll make the caveat and then I'll stop. I remain a strong proponent and enthusiast of AI. I also am not going to buy into the hype that it is going to replace humans anytime soon.
Right.
Campbell, you're
Yeah. The thought that came to me when we were discussing this topic was, and I thought of the book "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," which obviously was by Dick as the author, and it was then became Blade Runner in the two variations of that theme. it touches upon a fundamental aspect. And again, we could go completely down a philosophical route, which I won't. But it talks, it asks the question about what is consciousness. And, one of the things that, we discussed back in university about this concept was, well, do humans have a propensity to dream? And dream is a way to rearrange and clean the memory and the activities that you did during the day or the week or whatever you learned. And the fact is that computers, AI, are never going to get to that point. I just actually wrote a Substack on this as well because I'm really starting to get angry, not angry, just frustrated with people that say we're on the cusp of, super intelligent AI or general AI. We're on the cusp of, AI having consciousness, and we're not. But it leads up to some fundamental issues for me from a business perspective, that there's AI exceptionalism, where people assume that the AI has a consciousness, has a personality, and that's getting people into problems on a personal level as well as work-wise. You have companies that have jumped into, the promise of what AI is. Pardon me. Shopify, McDonald's, Duolingo. What were the other some of the lists that I sort of found here? Klarna, IBM, even with their HR automation approach, all jumped in thinking with this AI exceptionalism that AI would resolve or drive a better profitability for organizations. And they've all stepped back. They've all just realized, well, we need humans because humans have the ability for judgment. And I think, as you said, Brian, humans have the ability to adapt to an environment that doesn't necessarily have all the data points, which I think is critical. One of the programs I went through at MIT was, MIT focuses on augmentation. So whatever approach we should be taking with AI and humans, the AI needs to augment the human, because we as humans developed AI. We shouldn't be putting it in the front seat. It should be a necessary tool to augment our capabilities. So you get into things like, what is the socio technical systems that an organization is going to deploy? How is it going to affect the human? How is it going to enhance the human? Yes, there's going to be certain risk associated with it. The other piece too, there's a lot of factors in play around this discussion about AI versus human intelligence. The great piece that I love to latch on to is that the human brain consumes or burns 20 watts of energy to think, to function. And that 20 watts can be applied across, as we all are well aware, a broad spectrum. Medicine, research, playing Wordle, whatever it may be, that 20 watts is highly adaptable, highly sort of capable. If you just do the complete comparison of AI compute cost to the human brain, yeah, AI beats us. But that is just sort of a fundamental piece. Then there's all of the other aspects associated with it. That 20 watts of human intelligence has a lot more value against sustainability issues with AI. How much water, how much electricity, all of the impact that we're having against the environment. What is the carbon footprint of an AI transaction versus a human thought transaction? And you start to see, again, risk adjusted ROI, that the human actually has greater value. So again, my view is that we need to keep this in check. We need to design workflows that leverage a unique sort of capability of leveraging the strengths of AI and the human intelligence to come up with what that fundamental solution should be for an organization.
Yeah, one of my thoughts about it is there was a quote somewhere. They were talking to an AI scientist. They said, "We create an image, but it's the human that determines whether it was pretty or not." And I think the other part of it is there's not one form of human intelligence, just as there's not one form of AI. You wouldn't take a painter and compare them or ask them to take a test against a bioengineer and expect them to take that test. You wouldn't expect the scientist to go paint the pretty picture either. And so when we think about human intelligence around creativity, judgment, and empathy. It's important. The other part of it that's important is if we really think of human intelligence in terms of or AI in terms of human intelligence, and that's what we're going to expect. We're going to introduce bias that we should be governing against, things that are bad in the human intelligent realm, if you will, that we certainly don't want AI to pick up. And so one of my thoughts about it, one of the questions I came up with was I think if you take the human qualities and AI's ability to do things like process data and do things that it does really well, I think there's no doubt if you bring them together, you've improved the results. And if lacking one, the human may get to the AI result, but the AI will have a hard time if the human is not in the middle, at least providing some level of judgment and guidance.
Yeah, I'm gonna go three different examples here because I want to hit different ways that people are thinking about using AI and the paths that we're on. One is somebody close to me who wears a smartwatch all the time, sleeping, everything, and was getting this indicator periodically of a heart problem. And they weren't sure what to do. By the way, this is a person in tremendous physical condition. Uh, in the research over time, they didn't want to go to a doctor because they felt fine. As it turns out, they also are dealing with tennis elbow, which impinges the nerves and the flow of blood.
Mm.
So what the smartwatch was detecting was actually tennis elbow, not a heart issue. Now they could have reacted, gone to a hospital, run thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of tests for nothing. So that's one where people can go down the path with AI. Another is, and this kind of goes to, I think, to Campbell's point, perception and context. I was coaching for a group of sales leaders, and there was one who I'd gotten to know fairly well. We had done 4 or 5 sessions together, and we got on a session, and I could tell right away something was off. And I asked. Turns out this person had put their dog down the day before.
Mm.
They'd had the dog for 14 years, had longer than their spouse or kids. And I said, "Have you told anybody?" He said, "No, nobody at work, nobody on her team, nothing." She had taken a few hours off in the afternoon after they had to put the dog down, and then just kind of sucked it up and went back to work. AI can't detect that. They could detect a performance issue, and a performance issue that could last potentially for days or weeks. But you need the human who actually knows the other human to say something's not right. And the third is, back to the point of the neural pathways. When we do something over time, we learn, we react, we respond. I can't use AI in a sales call. I can't put into Perplexity or ChatGPT the objection that I just got and wait for the response. It comes from repetition. And I'm not the smartest person on my street, never mind in sales. But I got 40 years and a couple of thousand transactions under my belt and managed hundreds of people at this point. So I don't need to go to AI. It's in the neural pathway. That doesn't mean I'm not still learning from AI and using it for lots of different use cases. But in the moment when I have to react or respond to something, I have to react or respond. We need the same thing from a doctor, right? That was the article that you shared, Brian. You can't wait for somebody to say, "Oh, let me go and see what AI says I should do right now." And I don't think that people have gotten to that point to understand, and we keep talking about the different tools. What tool do I need right now? And the number one tool you are going to need is your brain.
Real quick, and I think if you flip it around, also, you talked earlier, Mike, about you continue to go through the same stop sign and the same intersection, and all of a sudden it changes to yield, and you don't even recognize it because you've been through that intersection so many times and someone taps your back bumper, whereas AI may not have that pathway or that experience, and it would have seen in its approach, it saw the sign for the first time. So that's where combining the two could be of great value. Campbell, were you going to add to that point?
Um, no, I mean, I think you've got some more questions coming up or in areas to discussion, but I think it fundamentally comes down to agency and responsibility, and the human is the one that fundamentally has that. Now, if we start seeing legal cases change to the point that AI is deemed it has the ability to create a patent or win a copyright law legal challenge, then I'm going to get really concerned because then we're blurring the lines between HI and AI. But yeah, I think it comes down to the responsibility of the humans to sort of put it in constraints and understand what it
Very
is
good
and how to
point,
use it.
Campbell. This is a great point. We are. I shudder at the thought of somebody going to court and using AI as their defense for something that they said, did, wrote,
Yeah,
whatever. Oh, well, AI told me that this was a legal thing to do, and it wasn't.
yeah,
Yeah, there was a prediction of one of these polls, whatever you want to call them, and they were saying that AI is going to sue somebody or some, that it's going to go the other way. And I thought we're in a real, and that sort of led to, we sort of got through this next question, but who's responsible for the accuracy in what AI generated? And the answer, I personally think, at least for the next 10 years, has got to be the human. Otherwise, we're stepping away from the responsibility that is inherently ours. I think, Campbell, you started the conversation, we created it, then it has to be we're responsible for what the outcome is.
yeah.
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. What happens? What do you, I'm the most guilty of, I say thank you and please, and have this great interaction with ChatGPT, and then I walk away with feeling either rewarded for it because it's always nice back to me, or worse, I feel bad that I'm not being objective enough to the results because I know it wants to truthfully make me happy, and that's not probably good for me always in a work environment. So, do you all have an idea of what happens when we just even go down that rabbit hole even more, where we're starting to treat AI as just another human on the team?
Yeah, I really believe. I was actually discussing this with somebody last week, and I think it's still the same. So I'm going to sort of position this one way and then come back to that question. Um, Typically, when you deploy technology in a large enterprise or even mid-size organizations, whether it's software, whether it's SaaS cloud offering, typically the software costs about 10 to 15% of the overall budget of a project, right? And projects obviously have timelines, and there's skills and time and resources and all of the planning that has to go into deploying technology. So let's assume it's AI. As we've seen, history repeats itself, and regardless of the technology, as a project is being implemented and as it's reaching the goal of getting either to final pilot and deployment and production, what gets thrown out the window? Training and change management, the soft skills. So the soft skill pieces are basically thrown off the budget because the critical path is saying we need to get this thing deployed. What that means, what is that indicative of, is that if there's change happening with the technology and we minimize or mitigate the soft skill training that is required, then we're going to get into problems where this AI exceptionalism is going to be maintained. And people are not going to be educated to fully understand the implication of what it means to work with an AI employee. So, to try to answer your question, there has to be a clear delineation between I'm working with an AI bot, I'm working with agents, I'm working with a human. And I think that is a fundamental piece of what any organization has to implement and maintain through either annual training, like all the other type of trainings that we have to go through on an annual basis in corporations. I think it's just fundamental, and it's just there's a high degree of risk associated with it if that doesn't happen, because people will start to interact with an AI piece. And the other piece to remember, and what I'm seeing, sorry, very quickly, is to say, a lot of discussions I'm having now, people aren't really focused on the AI piece per se. They're focused on agents. So insurance companies, banks, healthcare, they're focused more on implementing agents into their infrastructure to automate a lot of the data flow and sort of automated decision-making capability. But the thing to remember is that an agent has the memory of a goldfish. And so again, you lose context. You lose all of the capabilities that a human brain, intellectual capital, maintains over that same scenario within an organization. Anyway, that's my perspective that we have to manage it.
You might have insulted a goldfish, but I'm not sure about that. But I think what it that led me to is I I had written about governance, but I think where we really are at this is that the human plus AI is going to be we're going to be in a better world, but none of it um, removes the responsibility of the human to both make sure it was developed correctly, to make sure that the results are approved or what we want it to be or expected. And I think that is one of the keys to the puzzle is that, and I know when it comes to governance, we talk a lot about guardrails and all these other technologies and tools out there. But I think to both of your points, we're not going to if we remove human judgment and objectivity, then we're going to have an issue down the road. And I don't know if either one of you have anything to add about governance.
Yeah, well, it's not so much about governance. I think it's like this is the where I keep coming back to, which is humans are really bad at communicating. We are whether it's on a personal level or professional level, we're really bad at it. And one of the reasons we're bad at it is because we lack specificity. We think that people are interpreting what it is that we're saying,
Mhm.
or we're reacting because they've misinterpreted something that we've said or written or tone. And the problem then with AI is that in order for AI to work, it requires specificity. Taking an AI training class right now. Last week we did an hour and a half of prompts, and the
Mhm.
prompts are amazing. But in order to make the prompts work, the level of specificity required is lacking in most humans or many humans.
Mhm.
So our expectations for what AI is going to do and when it's going to do it are completely off base because we have to, as Campbell just said, we have to educate people. This is a K through 12 uplift of education. We have to retrain our workforce
Mhm.
from the beginning because otherwise you're going to put shitty prompts in and they're going to get bad information and they're going to react and respond to it and they're going to cost their businesses millions of dollars because they don't know how to ask specific questions.
So we're at the end of time as
Yeah,
usual.
and I got to swear at the end, so yay me.
So I
You
want
got to say sorry, and I got to sit and I got to swear. So Brian, it's up to you to do something that's like in your domain now.
well, I think what I want to leave it at, one key point that we haven't talked about is, and it's really bothering me lately, is that the first thing the human needs to understand, even if you're not a technologist, you're a business person, is you need to understand some of the fundamentals of how AI actually works and what it does and what it's expected to do. And when you have an expectation of exceptionalism, the way Campbell you mentioned, and you don't understand how it gets to a result, then you can't the rest of it is the judgment of what you have of what those results are becomes suspect. And then one other comment real quick. There was a post today about um, if your AI gets it 90% right, maybe that's good enough. And I thought if you're doing marketing messaging where you're going to do A/B testing anyway, 90% would be excellent. If you have an X-ray determining whether you have cancer or you broke a bone, I don't think 90% would work. So that human judgment of what is good enough or what is accurate and what kind of criteria you need to apply to that solution, I think is important. Um, Campbell, any last thoughts?
Uh, yeah, I mean, since I focus on governance, I'll just hit very quickly. I mean, there's a lot of things being put into place that organizations are trying to wrestle with. So yeah, to maintain sort of a split between human intelligence and artificial intelligence, governance can actually play a role from that point of view. But there's regulations, obviously, EU AI Act. Some of the states are starting to enforce AI acts. The US federal government may at some point enforce something further down. Each country is deploying something, a framework or regulation. Those are going to be in place. But what has to happen for an organization is that there has to be what we call anticipatory governance. So flexibility, adaptability, and when it comes down to separating the AI from the human, that is one of the fundamental pieces of where governance plays a critical role. And the thing that people need to remember about governance is that governance is not going to be a hindrance to deploying AI. It actually helps organizations scale faster and doing it more successfully while reducing a risk as well. Anyway, you had asked about governance. I had to put in a commercial.
That's good. Mike, I'm going to let you wrap it up.
Oof. So I'm going to come back to the specificity and just what AI can and cannot do, and what it should and should not do, and the way to think about it. You're not getting on a plane with a pilot who has been trained on AI. They have been through rigorous training, years of training, instrument training, etc. You're not getting on the road with somebody driving an 18-wheeler that has had AI training. They've had to go through training, driving school, years of training before they get behind the wheel. You're not going to a doctor who's been taking AI courses. They've gone through years of university, residency, internships, etc. That's how you become expert in your domain, not through AI. And until or unless we are teaching people how to use AI in their domain in conjunction with experience, we're going to keep stubbing our toes on this, and we're not going to get where people actually want to get to with it.
Well,
That's
thank
it.
you all, and thank everybody for listening.